Good morning. Today is the 10th day of Cheshvan and I believe 25th of October. And we're up to the fourth reading of Lecha. And this year, if you haven't seen the wonders, so we changed it a little so that it follows the readings, and there's a little article for each day of the week. So here, the background story is that there's a world war, basically. World war between the Mesopotamians and those who have left Mesopotamia and they went further west. And anybody can read into that whatever they want. And people are still in the east and the west. And they're having war. For 12 years there was peace, and then the 13th year the war started out. And Avram is not directly involved. He wasn't part of this whole conflict. But, in fact, he probably didn't even intend to do anything until we read Vayevo Palit, that there was some survivor from this war who came to Avram. Why did he come? That's the big question. Well, what does he have anything to do with it? And he tells him, what does he tell him? He tells him that his nephew's been captured. He doesn't tell him there's a world war and you have to get involved, because he probably wouldn't do anything. He finds a reason. The reason is because your nephew was captured and you have to save him. Well, why does he come to Avram? What's Avram in this whole? He's just one man. And even if he has some followers, how can he participate in a war this big with 4 kings against 5 kings? What's Avram in this whole thing? How's he in this whole mess? So he finds the reason. The reason is because of your nephew. So, what's with his nephew? His nephew left him. Lot, his nephew, on the face of it, he said, I don't want to follow Abraham's path. I want to go in my own direction. Which direction did he go? To Sodom v'Amorah, Sodom and Gomorrah. Couldn't be more detached from Avram than you could think. But Avram decides to go and get involved, and that is a lesson in and of itself, and how he wins, and everything that happened there. But we want to look at what the Torah calls him now. The Torah gives him a new title. It says Avraham the Hebrew. Avram Ivri. New title. Nobody's ever been called a Hebrew before. So what does this word mean? So obviously this has something to do with the fact that he called upon him, that the survivor, the sages say the survivor was Og, the king of the Bashan, the giant, maybe him or his predecessors, whoever it was. But he thought this was a reason to go to Avram because he's the Ivri, he's the Hebrew. So we need to understand what is a Hebrew. Why is a Hebrew someone who would get involved in this? What's the whole idea? So the sages say like this. He came and told Avram the Hebrew. There's 3 opinions. Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Nehemiah, and the sages. They have 3 different explanations for this word Hebrew. We're on page 9. And then the indented text is from the Medrash. Rabbi Yehuda says, he is called the Hebrew because the entire world is on one side and he is on the other side. Right away from this you begin to understand, he's Hebrew means he's different. He's not like everyone else. As much as Avram is the person who wants to change the world, and as much as in order to change the world you have to wear the clothing of the world, you have to dress like the world, you have to speak like the world, you have to understand how they think. But everybody knows that he's different. And when does it come out? It comes out particularly in a time of war. There's something about a war that suddenly makes a lot of differentiation, and everybody finds and expresses who they truly are. You can't hide yourself in a war. In times of peace, everybody looks like they're all the same. But now something else. And so what is this idea? That he's on one side of the world and everybody else is on the other side. That's Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Nehemiah says, Avram is called a Hebrew because he is of the descendants of Aver, the son of Shem, the son of Noach. It just means his descent. He's a Hebrew, but then there's a lot of people who were descendants of Aver. Avram wasn't the only one. Lot was also. Why is he called? This is a question. The sages say he is from the other side of the river, and he speaks in the Hebrew tongue. They say two things. First of all, he comes from the other side of the river. What does that mean? Geographically, the river that they're talking about is the Jordan. Some opinions say it's the Euphrates, but normally we understand it's the Jordan. And there were people, Avram's family was one of them, that moved from Mesopotamia across the river, across the Jordan, to the land of Canaan. That was a very important shift in population that happened in that time. There's actually a very interesting book that was written about it by one of the great French scholars of the previous generation, André Neyer. He wrote a lot of what we know archaeologically about this time period. In any case, this is very common that we have Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Nechemia. Most of the Medrash, in fact, the Midrash Rabbah, the main Medrash that we have, is these two sages always giving their two different opinions about almost everything. If you go through Midrash Rabbah, you'll see Rabbi Nechemia, Rabbi Yehuda. And a lot of times there's another opinion that was collected from the sages. We don't know who these sages are, but other people. So how do we think about this? What do we want to say? So when we look at it, there's three different possibilities. We have to understand that it's not a dispute. It's rather that the world is complex. And each of the opinions is covering a different aspect of reality. But the reality is very complex. So the first thing you can do here is you can say, since there's three that are four. Why three that are four? Because we have Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Nechemia, and from the sages we have two different opinions. So altogether we have four. Again, sages here is general. It's like saying, I don't know who we have this tradition from, but we have this tradition, and these are two traditions that come from the sages. So it's really like saying that there are four here. So the moment you have four, you say that they, right away, you want to correlate them, you want to correspond them to the four letters of Hashem's essential name, Yud Kei Vav Kei. So how do we do this? So the first opinion, Rabbi Yehuda, what's he talking about? He's saying the entire world is on one side, and Avram, he's on the other side. So how do we understand this? So to be entirely different than everyone else means you have to have a different state of mind. You have a different conceptual scheme of the world, a different consciousness. You think about the world in a different way than other people do. So that's what Rabbi Yehuda is saying. Everybody thinks like this. That's why they got into the World War. And he thinks differently. Meaning he sees, and it's clear why, because Abraham wants to create peace in the world. So he wouldn't be involved in this in the first place. But after everybody's in the melee and they can't get out of it, so you have to turn to someone like Avram and say, can you solve this problem that we only thought about solving with conflict? We didn't have any other options, as it were. So we need someone with a different state of mind. Then Rabbi Nechemia, and it's usually like this, we'll see. Usually Rabbi Yehuda is a more masculine explanation, and Rabbi Nechemia is usually the more feminine masculations. All through the Medrash Rabbah you can see this. So Rabbi Nechemia, he says, why is this? Why is he called Ivri, Hebrew? Because he's a descendant of Aver. What's it got to do with anything? How can you understand this? He's a descendant of Aver. So he says that Aver here is he represents the ancient wisdom. He's not just a descendant in the sense that he was someone who was his forefather. We know that there was a yeshiva of Shem and Ever. There was a yeshiva of the children of Shem and the children of Ever. What did they do there? They studied something. Okay? So he has an ancient wisdom. It's not so much that he has a different conceptual scheme. He has a different tradition of wisdom. And here you might say, maybe he thinks like everybody else, but the point is that he represents an ancient wisdom. It's also a different state of mind, but it's not how he is now. It's like the past. He comes from a different past, as it were. The state of mind that you're talking about, that Rabbi Nechemia the Rabbi Yehuda talked about, that's the way he is now. Now we're saying he also has a completely different tradition. He has a different past. He remembers something. He's more ancient than everyone else. He remembers something that the others don't remember anymore. Now you could say that they're connected, Because maybe what he remembers, for instance, and everybody else doesn't remember anymore, is that everybody came from Adam, that everybody came from Seth. Maybe that's his wisdom that he but obviously the thing that he remembers the most is he remembers Hashem. Because if you have that tradition going from Adam to Shem to Evel, then you have a connection to Hashem. So he's an Ivri means that he has an ancient past that connects him to something that nobody else is connected to. Then we have the two opinions of the sages, and they appear together because they're also linked. One says he comes from the other side of the river, and the other opinion here is that he spoke a different language. Both of these, they represent feminine aspects. How are these feminine aspects? Because to come from a different place is usually associated with the sphira of bina, of understanding. It's Ezehu mekom bina, it says in Eov. What is the place of understanding? So understanding is usually associated with geography, with space. In fact, it creates space. Like when we think of a mother, understanding is also the mother principle. So the most important thing about a mother is she can create space for a child. Man doesn't have room. And we're not just talking about that she can give birth because she has a womb, she has space. It's also because afterwards, after the child is born, she's able to push herself aside and give room and completely dedicate herself to the child. So Bina, understanding, and here in this case, the first opinion of the sages is related to space. The second opinion here of the sages is that he spoke a different language. Language is also always associated with Malchut, with the kingdom, with the speech of the person. Malchut Peh. It's one of the things that we read Erev Shabbat when you say Patach Eliyahu. So he says Malchut Peh. The speech is the kingdom. It's what we have in our mouth. So what do we have here? We had an explanation of wisdom of the past. That was Rabbi Nehemiah. Then we had Rabbi Yehuda who said that he's a different conceptual scheme, he's a different picture of the world. That here is the Eranpin. That's the Midot from Chesed to Yesod. And Dat especially. He has a different conceptual scheme, he has a different frame of mind, to say he has a different consciousness. Consciousness is always Dat. So these are the Yud and the Vav. Again, wisdom is Yud, and the Vav of Hashem's name is Dat or Zeir Anpin, the 6 Midot. That's according to them. Now the two opinions of the sages, who here are the complete feminine, so they're the Hey and the Hey, the two Heys. The first Hey is the mother, the understanding, Bina, and that space, he comes from a different place. And the last one is speech. Kingdom, Hey, the last Hey is speech. So Avram is different, so here they're painting a full picture of how he's different. And you have to have someone who's standing outside to be able to resolve a conflict like this. To be able to give some kind of understanding to what do we do here? Like how do we even solve this? And he solved it in a very interesting way. We won't get into it now, but there's a lot to be said about how he did it and what did he turn it into. So the important thing here is, I'll just say the salient point, and on Shabbos, God willing, I'll talk about a lot more about. On Shabbos, I'm going to be in Oxnard. It says here, that's what it says. So I hope I will be there. So the salient point is he turned it into an educational campaign. The way you really solve these problems, even when you have to actually go to war, is you can't come and say, I'm going to war just because it's just because it's the right thing. You have to make it into an educational campaign. And that's what it says, Vayarek et chanichav. He gathered his educatees, the one he was responsible for their education. It has to, if every war is not a conflict really over possessions, over land, that's the excuse. That's the external reason. The real reason is because there's a problem in the world with how people see the world. So if you want to solve a war, you have to first of all solve it educationally. You have to come and say there's a message in what I'm going to do. I'm not going to do this just because I'm stronger than he is, or I'm better than he is, or whatever. You have to say there is a real message here. And again, anyone can read into that what they want for our time. I think it's very pertinent. But when we do it like this, and we say, but in the end, the Medrash divided it into three opinions. They said Rabbi Nechemia, Rabbi Yehuda, and Chazal, and sages. So if you look at this carefully, you see again that the two feminine, the hay and the hay, the sages, space and language, they really are both about space. Why? Because geography, we saw this in chapter 10 of Genesis, chapter 10 of Bereshit, that dispersion occurs because of a change in language, meaning geographical differences are perhaps more a result of a change in language than they are of anything else. So these two actually go together, that there is language that creates geographical space. So both of them are really connected to space. Wisdom, we said, is the past, it's time. He has a time dimension to him. And finally we said that the Rabbi Yehuda, who says that he had a different conceptual scheme, he had a different consciousness, that's what we call soul. So this also corresponds, these four opinions, which are really just divided into three, they correspond to the basic model in Sefer Yetzirah, in the Book of Formation, which is called Olam Shana Nefesh. World, which is like space, time, which is what we said, wisdom, he has a past, and Nefesh, the soul, that he has a different consciousness, different from everyone else. So this is the message here of Hebrew. What does it mean to be a Hebrew? That even though he sets out to change the world, and he has to enter into the world to do it, but he's always different in these either four or three things, depending on how you want to look at it. But really the three things are what set him apart. In time, in space, in time, and in soul, he's a different creature, as it were. He's something entirely different. And that's exactly why they turn to him. That's exactly why he can solve this war.